Good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Jack French. I've been researching radio's lady detectives for about 20 years. And at the time my book was published in '04, I had located 44 radio shows in which a woman was either the lead or the co-lead in a radio show. Now, it's possible that we've missed some. It's also possible that some have been slightly misidentified. The one that Carl Shadow, an old-time radio researcher, takes issue with me on is Helen Holden, Government Girl, which was a soap opera. And based upon the limited knowledge we had of that show, because there are no audio copies and we've never found the scripts, although Carl eventually found one after my book was published, Jim Cox and I got into the situation where you kind of cross-fertilize each other's ideas and you don't have a lot of evidence, but it sounds good, so you go with it. And I talked him into putting Helen Holden, Government Girl, in his radio Crime Fighters, and he talked me into putting it in Private Eyelashes. And as I say, there wasn't a lot of proof other than some sketchy newspaper clips. And because there were no scripts and because there were no audio copies, we were unable to substantiate anything in that regard until after my book was published, when lo and behold, we locate the star of the show. I had assumed that since this was a World War II show and it was produced in Washington, D.C., that nothing would survive from Helen Holden, Government Girl. But a friend of mine on the Washington Post wrote a column about Helen Holden, and he gets a call from a Library of Congress clerk who says, my aunt, Nancy Ordway, was the lead in that show. And he said, well, is she still alive? He said, of course. She's 89 years old, and she's as alert as you or I. In fact, she's the director of the Key West Harbor Museum. Give her a call, you know. So the reporter called her and verified that she was indeed very much on the wall. And I called her, and after we chatted a while, I said, now, is there any chance you've got either any scripts or any audio copies of your show? And she said, no, I don't have anything from that show, and I'd love to have it because my grandchildren are very interested in that. So John Kelly gave her a nice publicity column in the Washington Post. She sent him a current photograph. I had furnished the 1941 photograph we had of her from Mutual, and everything was dandy. And this was in the fall of '04. And then in early '05, Carl Shadow finds one script, the audition script for Helen Holden at the Library of Congress. And for some reason, they let him make a copy of that. And of course, almost no museums or archives will let you make copies of anything. So I called Nancy Ordway in Key West to tell her the good news, and the phone was disconnected. And I thought, well, you know, they had a couple of early hurricanes that year. So I wrote her a letter and said, hi, it's me again, and I've got the script for you. And no response to the letter. And then a month after that, I get a call from her son, and he said, Mom died 3 months ago. And he said, but I read your letter and I really appreciate your efforts. Would you please send me the script and I will make copies of it and give it to the grandkids, which we did. At any rate, of these 44 radio lady detectives, roughly half of them operated on their own. They were solo. They ran their own agency. They were a lawyer, a policewoman, a private detective, etc. Another half, roughly 24 of them, were part of a team. 7, of course, were part of a married couple. And the remainder were actively engaged as genuine crime fighters with helping their boss. Now, I used the screening process of if they were significantly helpful in any crime scene investigation of their boss, they got in. If they didn't, we eliminated them. And that would be some people you hate to lose, like Nikki Porter and Ellery Queen, whose main function is to stand around and say, gosh, Ellery, how'd you figure that out? There's one embarrassing one in Ellery Queen in which there are 4 murder suspects. They all live in Nikki Porter's apartment, and she still has not a clue as to which one until Ellery tells her. So, now, actually, female detectives predate most of the biggies in the male side of it. We have 2 female detectives, Irene Delaroy and Maureen Ravelli, coming out of a syndicated series from Transco in 1932, which is long before Dick Tracy or Sam Spade or Nick Carter or anybody else reached the airwaves. Now, many of these early sleuths were soap operas. Carolyn Day Detective, whom we've never successfully placed in time, but syndicated show probably about mid-30s. Then a soap opera, Kitty Keene Detective, which started in 1937 era. And about that same time, Philco Detective. Philco Detective was sponsored by, obviously, Philco. And they were very, very generous in the prizes awarded at the end of each show, which makes it frustrating to us now listening to that show because we never know exactly how she figured it out. In other words, they will sketch the clues in briefly, but at the time, the listeners were supposed to run to their Philco dealer, get the booklet, fill out the clues that they determined from the broadcast, and mail it in. And the prizes were very generous. I mean, this was just after the Depression era, and they were giving out $5,000 to the first place winner on a weekly basis for this show. So Philco was spending big bucks on it. Clayton Bud Collier, who about that same time was looking forward maybe to his dual role as Superman Clark Kent, played the lead male in it, who was of course subservient to Philco, his girlfriend. And at the time my book was published, we had no idea who that was. And a year after my book was published, some radio researchers going to work on ProQuest managed to identify her for me and for you, and it's Peggy Allenby, who is probably as well known in television as she was in radio, and she had a starring role in TV soap operas when she died in the mid-60s. One of the more unusual crime fighters was Marlene Dietrich. And this was a show in which she got into it because her movies were starting to topple at the box office. They wouldn't pay her what she expected to be paid to go before the cameras. She refused to go on television because she said, no, they will see me for free. Cannot do that. Somehow it didn't seem the same on radio. They could hear her for free. That was okay. So she was totally in charge of this production. It was called Time for Love. And she hired the writers, she hired the directors, and CBS just kind of stood around and said, please get these shows in on time and whatever, because it was a weekly series and she would prefer to work practically nothing during the week and then maybe on Saturday record 3 shows in a row or whatnot. So over the year and a half the show was on the air, she recorded a total of 58 episodes. And it was a show in which she played a lightly veiled persona of her own, in that she was her cover story was she was a nightclub singer named Diane LaVolte. And Diane LaVolte would go around, and no matter what exotic location she was in the world, something terrible would happen: a kidnapping, an assassination, a bombing of the Capitol, gun smuggling, and she would race in and solve the case and then disappear and go on to her next nightclub engagement. And so she would sing in each half-hour show at least one song, maybe 2, and if there were 2, she would alternate. One would be in English, one would be in German.